Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today, we're introducing a new tour. It's called the Kunal Invitational, hosted by, you guessed it, Kunal. And this is actually kind of a new thing for DOU. Basically, this is an idea that's been floated around for a while, um, mostly by me and Kunal, um, of basically playing Team Lock DOU. So I'll let Kunal introduce more of it. But that's basically the gist.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I kind of got this idea just through practice games. I would load the same team, and other people would load different teams every game, and I was like, fuck it. What if we just did team lock best of three, even though it's 6v6? Um, and I tried that in NatDex for a little bit, and it was like pretty fun. I played some DOU sets with best of three team lock, and I thought it was pretty fun as well. And so I asked about it in the DOU cord, and Arctic Blast was like, well, we already ran this tournament and everyone hated it, so I'm not going to run another one. And I was like, well, you probably ran it incorrectly, so I'm going to do it myself.
Nice.
And that's how that's how we got here. So I put together this tournament. Initially, it was just going to be a few of my friends. So I asked like Z and Nails and Burns and QSNS and some other people. And it was just going to be like a small 8-person kind of one day, like 5-round tournament, just bang it all out all at once. Um, and then as I was asking people, I think more people started showing a little bit of interest in the DOU cord, and I got to like a pretty reasonable player list with some of the best players in the scene. And so I was like, well, let me just like take this further, right? Well, let's make it a proper 16-person bracket. We'll run it over a period of time. I think it's going to end up being like 9 or 10 weeks, um, and we'll put something on the line, right? So it's a $750 prize pool, split between first, second, and third, um, and it should be pretty fun. I think it'll be. I think best of three team lock is a format that rewards building really heavily, and also for people who build very concrete, like fundamentally strong teams, the lack of sideboards doesn't actually matter that much, because a lot of what you're doing in 6v6 doubles is still, it's still risk management, and it's still figuring out what sets your opponent has and figuring out how to play against those. And Terra adds like a whole other dimension to that as well. So I think it should be pretty interesting. We'll kind of see how it goes.
Yeah, I agree. Um, But yeah, we basically, or I say we, it was mostly Kunal, uh, came up with a kind of a unique tournament structure to give basically everyone a lot of games to play. So there's going to be a lot of games in this tournament. So the first phase, it's a pools phase. So we have pools of 4 people, 4 pools. We'll go over the pools later and talk a little bit of hyping this up or whatever. But so for the first phase, there's going to be like 3 weeks of pools. Each week players are going to be like assigned to play against one other person in their pool. Um, and then at the end of these 2 weeks, the 2 players in each group with the highest record will move to like a winners bracket, and then the 2 players with the lowest record will move to the losers bracket. So this way, everyone gets a chance to play, but the pools phase still matters. And obviously, entering the winners bracket at the end of the pools phase is a pretty big advantage over entering the losers bracket. And then from there, we're gonna have a double elimination bracket, kind of like your standard DOU seasonal. Um, and of course, players can use different teams each round, but during each round, they're stuck with the same team. Um, so yeah, I think that basically covers it. And then there's like tiebreaker stuff, which should not be, probably won't be super important. Might show up once or twice, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. So, I mean, the goal was just like, we have all these players. Some might say the 16 best players in DOU, minus one or two. Um, and so the goal was not only to, you know, get a winner of the term, but also to have each player play as many games as possible. And so that's why instead of basically a default round one of a double elim bracket where everyone starts in the winners bracket, we decided to do pools. So we have the 4 pools of 4 players. That'll get each player to play 3 games prior to going into the double elim bracket. So we'll get a minimum of 4 games from all players. Um, and then I think the winner plays something like 13 or 14 sets total. So it should be interesting. I think that we can talk a little bit about the player pool.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure. Let's see. Also, like one more thing I want to add is,
oh sure.
in theory, this tour should, because we're only having players build like one team each round, or maybe not even do that if they're just going to reuse. Hopefully, this tour should just be about playing, and like in the sense that there should be less burnout. So hopefully, this will be a very competitive tournament. And of course, people are playing for money on the line, which should also help reduce burnout. So it's
Yeah,
not too long
definitely.
if you're not into the tour, but it will go for like about a month and a half. And of course, we will be providing content for this weekly. We'll be trying to stream as many games as we can. Um, the caveat that if games are played at like 5 a.m. in the morning, I will not be there. GG.
Yeah.
All right, so
Well,
here's our player
we can
pool.
at least do a replay recap or something
Yeah, of course, yeah. Only like the weekly stuff,
for sure.
regardless of streams. So here's our player list. We have Emilio Forbes, who, if you don't know him, get good. We have Nails, a longtime DOU player, who's played in SCL for like very, very long time, and has put up basically good records every year. Burns also in that camp. Basically, you'll notice a lot of these players are basically just like some of the best SCL players over the last like, 4 or 5 years. Plus a few people that are newer but haven't had the chance to play in SCL. Other really good records. Um, and we have V, another longtime DOU player, QSNF as well. We have Michael Durbest too, who hasn't played the largest amount of DOU, but is, what's the word? Like
He's a very
undebatably the best,
good
one of the best players in the world, VGC
he's
and
a very good
singles.
Pokemon player,
Yeah,
regardless of what format he
yeah,
plays. He's a very very good Pokemon player, and so he asked me if he could play, and I was like, yeah, it seems very interesting to have someone who doesn't really have the DOU results that everyone else on the list has, but definitely has the experience and like the Pokemon skill and the team building expertise to still match up. So
right. Yeah, I'm really excited to see how he does. And he's also not like a noob to DOU or anything. He's
for sure.
played in a few OCTs. I think he cut one or two of them. Although I don't pay attention to that tour, so don't at me. Uh,
Yeah.
and then we have Frixel, the winner of last year's OSCT, also played in SCL last year. ESM, one of like best team tour players the last like or this generation really. Has kind of the best team tour record since the start of SV. Um, Bagel, former circuit champion. Wadera, also former circuit champion. Rat Packer, very prominent player in the community. He placed really high end circuit last year.
Yep.
Not a stranger to anyone who follows DOU. Zern, one of the best SCL players the last 2 years. Went like 9-1 one year and then like 5-3 the next year or something. Maybe even better. I don't remember. He might have gone like 7-2 last year. I don't remember. And then Ann, another player that people should recognize. And then Nito, SMB, and Akaru. Uh, Nito won OSCT a few years back. He's been one of the best players for a very long time. SMB, probably like if you look at any record sheet of DOU, SMB is like at the top. He has the most results. And then Akaru is Akaru. So yeah, it's a pretty good list. I'm really excited to see how this goes. You have anything thoughts to add on the players here?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, we'll talk more about the specific players. I think when we get into the pools, but
Mm-hmm.
we do have, players with results from like earlier in this gen, and then we have like players with more recent results, and you'll kind of see like that dichotomy, right? So, for
Yeah.
example, like Nito is a player who was extremely good and recently has not been playing super actively. Currently, I think he's 7-2 in OSDT as of this recording, so he's still in it. Um, he's still playing well, but compared to somebody like Rat Packer or ESM who has like a lot more recent success, it'll be interesting to see how they match up.
Also worth noting, like we have like basically all the best recent performers over like the last 5 years. Like the only like circuit champions that are not playing either got banned or like retired.
Yeah.
Uh, and the only OSCT champion who's not playing is Faye because he's bad. And the other guy got banned. So yeah, Faye's pretty bad and he's
Yep.
washed and he wouldn't want to play anyway or something. I don't
True.
know. Free Faye.
Yep. I agree.
But yeah, so this is just a really good list of players. That's enough on that. Let's get into the pools. Um, so let's talk about pool one first. Michael Durbest, Madara, SMB, and QSNS. What are your thoughts
Yep.
on this pool,
So
Kunal?
I mean, right off the bat, I think this is the pool that we're going to get the most non-standard teams out of. Just week one,
Mhm.
off the rip. Every single player here, I think, is going to bring something like insane. Um, because Michael is for SAT at least. Michael has used pretty much just teams that he's been passed. Um, Typically, I think in the past when he has built his own teams, they have been like pretty unique. You know, not like super standard, not super meta. Um, Madara always, you know, will bring something weird that he thinks will catch his opponents off based on their scouts. SMB, known user of like maybe not off meta mons, but like he'll always have a weird set on some of his Pokemon. And then you know, kind of the same thing with QSNS. So I think we'll see really creative teams. A lot of like direct counter teaming is probably going to happen in this pool, as opposed to generic like fundamental building.
Uh-huh.
I think if I were to make a prediction, I think that I would expect probably like QSNS and Madara to come out on top in this pool. But
Mhm.
really, I mean, I think it could go anyway. Like you could flip a coin 4 times and get like 4 different answers. You know?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like that for a lot of these pools. Like, there's some people I expect to like move on to the winners bracket, but like
Yeah,
it's not even really worth predicting. Or at least
for sure.
I don't feel confident in making predictions. Um, but yeah, this is really interesting. I think like kind of like the gap between three of these players being very very active in the DOU community, and then obviously MDB not being as active might make it a little bit more difficult, right, for some of these players to like kind of like get a handle on like what he's going to bring.
Yeah,
Um, so that's going to be an interesting dynamic to pay attention to. And then yeah, I mean, Madara is also a more relatively recent player compared to like SMB and QSNS, who have been around for like more than half a decade at least. I guess Madara has to at this point, but you know,
yeah,
yeah, I think this is a really good pool. But yeah, I think like Madara with its recent results is probably one of the favorites here, and then SMB and QSNS are both really good. Thing with SMB is like the number of times we get to see him play against like a lot of like really good players is maybe a little bit less. Because he doesn't usually play in SCL, or at least he hasn't like the time I've been around. So I'm
right.
really excited to see a lot of games like, with him against other players. I mean, we've seen him play really good games against other people in like DPL or whatever, but this is like it's a really good opportunity to see some of these players. And this is not just true for SMB. This is true for like all the players who have like not played in like SCL or whatever. We're gonna see a lot of high quality games out of them at like a rate that's like abnormal. And I mean, this is like stronger than an SCL pool, just objectively. But
For
yeah,
sure.
that's pool one. Um, any final thoughts on pool one? We might come back to it if we think of anything else. But
I think that's it.
yeah, pool two: Rat Packer, Z, Bagel, and Emilio. Uh, at a glance, other really interesting situation. We got like three really active community players, and then Emilio, who's played like one time this generation, and then like did not lose.
Yeah. Um, it's always interesting because Emilio is never away from Pokemon, but he's like
Mhm.
away from DOU outside of World Cup and like maybe I don't. Does he even play SCL?
Nope.
Does he
He played in
play?
he played in like Snake Draft, like when it was Snake
Does he play
Draft.
DPL?
Uh, no, he has not played DPL this generation, but he has in the past.
Okay, okay,
It's mostly
gotcha.
this gen. He hasn't really been around too much.
Cool. Yeah, I mean we'll see. I think he's been taking it a little bit easier on the VGC side of things, so maybe he'll have more motivation to play for this tournament, especially with money on the line. Um, to be honest, I don't know that it matters that much how active he is. Like Emilio's just the fucking goat, right? Like if he
Yeah,
has a good team, he'll load it and he'll like have pretty good odds of winning. Um, I think he also has the advantage of like having a lot of VGC experience, being experienced with Team Lock, having a ton of experience with, especially Team Lock closed team sheet.
well, that's actually a really
Um,
good point. And we didn't really talk about that with pool one, but that's something just briefly. That's something MDB has an advantage in as well compared to these other players who haven't played VGC as much.
yep,
Well, actually, I
definitely.
guess no,
Well,
I'm
so
skipping over.
even MDB, I think his like his VGC experience has all been, I think, with open team sheet.
Mhm.
And so like
That's fair.
not you know, I mean he has a lot of Pokemon experience. I'm sure he has plenty of experience with closed team sheet as well, but
Uh huh.
it you know, it does manifest a little bit differently when it's team lock closed team
Yeah.
sheet.
No, that's
The way
fair.
that you gather information early on in the sets and like some of the risks that you're allowed to take in different positions changes. So
Mm,
I think of anyone in this pool, it's like Nails, Emilio, Burns are going to be the most experienced by far.
yeah, that's true.
Z as well, of course.
Yeah, I see as well. Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing with this this pool here is like Emilio and Z have like a lot more team lock experience than the other two players here.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, Rat Packer and Biggle are maybe like two of the most prominent players like really come out this generation, and like make a name for themselves. The only one
Definitely.
else who's like relatively recent is Madara, but Madara was like really well known last gen as well, and these two were not. Um,
Yep.
I think actually, like, I think this pool is the one we're going to see the most counter teaming, honestly.
Really.
Aside from Emilio, but all three of these players, there are like five people who build teams in DOU. It's like Rat Packer, Z, Bagel, SMB, and then like ESM sometimes, and then like me. That's like it.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty true.
And three of them are in
this
this
is
pool.
this is the team building pool. Um, yeah, that's pretty interesting actually. That's a really different way to think about it. I think like when I saw this pool initially, I was thinking Rat Packer, in my opinion, would adjust the fastest of all
Mm,
the players who um, are not super familiar with closed team sheet, just because he has proven that he has, he's very skilled at identifying what's good in specific formats and
yeah,
building around those, and that's evident in his Team Bazaar posts and like how many people auto load teams from those and how good they are, months after it's been posted,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I think
So
Rat Packer is definitely like a top 2 or 3 team builder in DOU. Like I don't,
definitely,
I could not put him anywhere than that. So I'm really excited to see what he
yeah,
comes up with, and to see him adapt. I mean, Rat Packer's the only one here with like probably zero team lock experience, as far as I'm aware. Because Bagel has
yeah.
played some BGC as well, but not nearly as
Mhm.
much as the other two. But yeah, this is maybe the pool I'm personally most excited for. I don't know. It's just kind of fun to see Rat Packer and Bagel get a chance to play against some really good players as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, pool 3: ESM, Akaru, Burns, and Nito.
Okay,
I
this
don't
pool
even
is.
know what my thoughts on this pool are. I have to think.
I
I think
agree.
this is
So
the most even
somehow,
pool.
yeah, I do agree. I think it's probably the most even pool. It's also the pool. Like I look at all these players, and in my eyes, they're all players who like will look at their opponents the day before they play and like build something random and then show up to
Yeah.
their match and like rely on player skill.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so that's why I think for a tournament like this, it's pretty interesting because, again, ESM and Burns have like a ton of team lock experience,
Yeah.
and so they ESM especially because of the teams that he builds,
Yeah.
is more prone to like catching people off guard. I think who are not familiar with closed team sheet, right? And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of people who play against him who are not experienced with closed team sheet best of 3 team lock are going to feel like they got cheesed. That being said, ESM is also a little bit of an OTS merchant. He was like very, he was a very mid player. He was slightly above average, but he was just like a player that didn't have any particular regional cuts or like any notable results prior to Open Team Sheet being introduced in VGC. And as soon as OTS got introduced, he like instantly won a regional and he like got top 4 at another regional and he's been day 2ing and cutting and all this other stuff.
Yeah, that's true. But
So
I feel like it's a little bit that doesn't really tell the full story.
yeah,
Just because of all the success he's had playing DOU, which is like the most CTS of CTS formats.
for sure, for
Um,
sure.
but yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting point though. Someone who has like a lot of free team lock experience, but only really in OTS. It's a different thing than I think like Burns is probably like if Burns loads good teams, I think Burns probably makes it out of this pool in the winners bracket. I'd be very
Definitely.
surprised if he does not. I think he's the most experienced player here by like a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
Akaru and Nito are like not far off. None of these players, these are all really close players, like Schuster said. But it's hard for me to make a prediction beyond Burns. But I expect Burns to do well if he does not load like random shit Z built like 2 years ago in the pre-home meta, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I also think if there is like a broken team in Team Lock, like it's going to be found in Pool 3. Someone in Pool
Yeah,
3 is going to load it for sure.
yeah. I think
I don't
Nito
think
is one
there
of the
is,
other
but
reflections. These are
yeah,
some of the most creative builders as well. Like Nito and ESM um, have built some insane heat over the
yep,
years. And then Akaru and Burns are kind of team stealers. That's kind of the dynamic to pay attention to here. The dynamic between the two people who traditionally build teams and the two people who have a tendency to kind of steal teams, you know?
yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
say
it's
something?
yeah, no, you can't say something. Go ahead.
I'm really interested to see what Akaru does in particular in this tour because I especially saw this with Derby. Akaru is extremely capable of looking at the pool, like, and identifying what's working, and then adapting the teams to his play style. He did this with a couple teams in Derby. I notably modified a sand team to be extremely proficient in the matchup for his Natex games, and I'm really curious to see how he would do that in SV, because I think Akaru is actually a pretty solid builder when he puts his mind to it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. I also I thought it was pretty funny when I asked Akaru to play in this tour. His first response was, "Wait, did you mean to send this to somebody else?" That was
Oh,
the first message he sent back to me. He was just like shocked that I even invited him. So, um, I think it would be really exciting to see Akaru do well. And we'll definitely see how that turns out.
yeah. Uh, I thought there was something else I was gonna say. No, whatever. I'll remember it or I'll forget it. All right, pool
Yep.
four. This is a really, really stacked pool. I
Yep.
kind of said before we started recording, I actually think this pool might be the strongest overall. Um, it's between like I think like both pool three and pool four are like very even like players generally, but I think pool four is like kind of like that, except I think the four players here are like a little bit better than the players in pool three.
Mhm.
However, only one of them really has best of three team lock experience, but that's Snails. So like, uh, you know, one of the best
Yeah.
players in the tournament. But then like we have like Zern, who's like been one of the best players just in general since SV. Like honestly, Zern is maybe the best argument to be the best DOU player since Gen 9. Um, just based on like overall results and consistency. And then we have Ann,
Right.
who's kind of like flies under the radar a lot of the time, but is like always has some of the best records in these tours. And then Frixel, who's in the last year has really made a name for himself in a variety of situations, particularly like best of three tours, but not team lock tours,
Yeah,
obviously. So
definitely.
that's an interesting thing
I
to pay attention
also
to with Frixel.
I think one thing about Frixel as well is Frixel is very, very, very competent at figuring out how to perfectly C-team his opponents.
Mhm.
And that kind of manifests a lot in like team tours, for example. A lot of the options, like if you look at Derby or if you look at any of the past team tours that Frixel's played, or even like OSTT, um, there's always it always feels like Frixel is playing a positive matchup, and that's like not really an accident. That's just something
Mhm.
that Frixel really excels in.
Mhm.
So in a team lock situation, if Frixel is able to identify a weak point in his opponent's scout every single week and like bring a favorable matchup, then in theory he is going to be one of the strongest players in the pool.
Mhm.
Right. And that I think is really interesting compared to somebody like Nails, who is probably not even going to look too closely at his opponent's scout. He's just going to build a fundamentally good team and load it and play well.
Yeah.
The dynamics of this pool are probably the most interesting to me because I think all four players have a different top strength. I think Niels is the most well-rounded. I think Ann is actually the best builder in this pool at just making extremely solid teams with multiple game plans, which
Yep.
should excel in a best of three format. Frixel's by far the best counter teamer, and Zern is probably the highest ceiling of play in SV. I think they all have different win cons, and I'm extremely interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, definitely. I also think, um, like while Nails and Zern in my head are kind of similar players in like their peaks align pretty closely, right? They're both
Yeah.
very excellent at playing the game. One thing that I think Zern kind of excels in a little bit more than Nails does is he's less locked into like this idea of what's good and what's bad in the meta. And so you'll often see Zern bring like very creative, like not usually the whole team, but like teams with creative ideas or creative game plans that
This man
either haven't
loaded
really been seen before.
Salazzle
Yeah,
for
right. Like
multiple weeks in a
Salazzle,
row.
like Tornado's mousehold stuff. Like really, nobody's loading that in DOU, and Zern is using it very well. So things like that. Whereas Nails, I think, relies a lot on his experience with Pokemon. The guy's been playing since fucking RBY, right? He relies a lot on his experience to kind of identify what is good and what's not off rip. And I think sometimes that'll lead to him like writing off things that should actually be good or that could perform. And so that'll be like an interesting thing to see if he's able to. Well, first of all, if it even matters in this tournament, and more importantly, if that'll give Zern an advantage here or not in this pool.
That's a really good point. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of see that dynamic like throughout the pool. I mean, that's just a general thing with like DOU. I mean, you see it in like tours like SCL or whatever, but this is like if we had SCL, but like there were like 16 players, and like all the best players signed up.
Right.
Instead of like half the best players like not even signing up because it's not in the DOU forum.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I'm just really excited for this tournament. Any final thoughts here? What we should cover?
I don't have anything in mind. I think we talked about the pools, tournament structure.
Yeah.
It'll be starting round one pairing on the 28th. Yeah, definitely. So we'll get games per week. We'll get 8 games per week.
Yeah.
For the pools phase, and then yeah. So week 1 goes up April 28th, and then we'll, as the games come in, we'll record them and we'll do
weekly recaps,
play by play or whatever. Yeah,
I think the game, like the streams are going to obviously be more focused on like what's actually going on in the games, but I think the streams we're going to probably like dive into like what kind of like dynamics of Team Lock we're seeing, maybe how it compares to BGC, etc., and obviously just like a recap of all the games and like the standings. But yeah, hope you are excited for this tournament as I am. But yeah, we'll be back soon with more actual content. But yeah, shout outs to Kunal Invitational. Subscribe.